Hi, this is Courtney. I am calling in here from DC, and I'm with Kate Glantz, who is an entrepreneur and the founder of Heartfully. She was also a Peace Corps volunteer and has worked for the State Department and Peace Corps and lived in Tanzania and Senegal. And I know I missed a lot of your amazing bio there, Kate, but that's why we have you here, so you can sort of tell us your own story. So we'll have you just jump right in, and then we will also have some questions. If you're in the audience, as always, you can click the blue Q&A button to submit questions now, or you can send them to us via Slack as well. So you can go ahead and take it away, Kate, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. It's fun to be on the other side. I was totally in your role not so long ago, so it's cool to be here. So I figure the best way for me to get started is to just give you guys a quick overview of my last 8 years since college. I can't believe it's been 8 years. That's kind of mortifying. But I'll just quickly run through all of the different roles I've played in government, communications, public diplomacy, and how really all of those roles, and especially Peace Corps, led me to where I am now I was just telling Courtney, as a very frazzled startup founder. So I attended the University of Michigan, and if anyone listening is from there, go blue. I studied political science and African studies, and looking back, those were not the most practical things that I could have studied for where I am today, but I don't regret it. I learned a lot. I studied abroad in Cape Town, and if any of you guys are on the fence about studying abroad, or just thinking it might not be for you, I can tell you definitively that study abroad was seriously the greatest, possibly the greatest 6 consecutive months of my entire life. I mean, it was amazing and formative and just really super fun. So huge plug for studying abroad wherever you might go. So I was kind of a go-getter, but I was also sort of a little lost. I went to a huge university, and I had absolutely no clue what I was going to do after college. But Peace Corps had always been sort of in my heart and mind, and so I applied back when it was like an 8-hour application, and I persevered, and it was the day before graduation. I'll never forget this, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I'm pretty type A, so that was sort of terrifying. And the mail came, and I got the huge envelope, and I don't even know if Peace Corps sends huge envelopes anymore, but it was like, you've been invited to go to Tanzania, and I was like, all right, I guess I know what I'm doing now. And so 6 weeks after I graduated college, I packed my 2 bags and moved to Tanzania, where I was a health volunteer. And essentially, I probably shouldn't say this, but I don't work for Peace Corps anymore, so it's okay. I feel like being a health volunteer is where they send 22-year-olds who don't know what they're doing, because I had no marketable skills of any kind, really, unlike you guys who have tons of marketable skills now. Yeah, and I moved to this rural community. I had no electricity, no running water, and yet my community was just, so awesome that it didn't matter. So for 2 years, I built toilets, and I taught life skills to 6th and 7th graders, which sort of included things like how to set goals, and how to wear a condom, and wash your hands, just really kind of diverse, interesting things that are really interesting when you translate them into Swahili. And really, honestly, I just made a lot of great friends. Peace Corps, I look back and, I'm still in touch with a few people from my community, but the volunteers I served with, those people are my family to today. And so, and really, really, I look back on Peace Corps as sort of the springboard to my life, personally and professionally. So after Peace Corps, I, again, didn't completely know what I wanted to do, but I loved Tanzania. And so I decided to apply for a job in the capital at the Centers for Disease Control. It was a communications job that I was totally unqualified for, but I just borrowed somebody's suit and I strutted in there and told them that I could do it. And somehow they believed me. And here's my first bit of unsolicited advice. Google is your best friend. I Googled everything during my time there, and basically I just tapped into that Peace Corps, you better figure it out mentality to get through and to persevere. Um, and I'll touch more on that later, the sort of the figure it out skill or gene that's so important in pretty much all the things that I've done, but not yet. So basically, CDC was really cool. I traveled all over the country, basically like planning events, writing speeches, doing anything that all of you marketing and communications majors can probably are already doing way better than I did back then. But it was really cool. I did it for a year, and then I was very fortunate to receive an offer from the State Department. And so at the State Department, I worked in the office that coordinates America's HIV/AIDS initiative overseas. It's called PEPFAR. Some of you might have heard of it, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. So there, I had a pretty big portfolio. I had like 80 plus countries, and my job was basically to give, okay, how do I explain this? Basically, any American working for the government in one of those countries that does communications. So your State Department communications person, your USAID, your CDC, your DOD, all of those comms people that have AIDS in their portfolio, you know, the America's AIDS portfolio, I needed to give them like the content and the talking points from headquarters that they can then communicate to their foreign publics. So it was a lot of writing what we called like building block speeches, just enough so that you kind of get the top level and then you can adapt things to your cultural context. So it wasn't super creative, but it was very formative, and I'd be happy to talk to any of you guys about what it's like to work at the State Department and wear a suit and see amazing people strutting by you every day, because it was pretty cool. But after 2 years of that, I sort of was feeling the itch to go overseas, and so I took a role with Peace Corps Response. And so I'm not sure how familiar you are with that yet, but essentially if you've already served in Peace Corps, or if you just have a lot of professional experience, you can do a short-term assignment. And so I took a one-year position managing communications for Peace Corps' malaria initiative in Africa called Stomping Out Malaria in Africa, which is where I met Courtney. And that was super cool. So I was coming from state where everything is super bureaucratic. You have very, very little decision-making power. You're just like a well-dressed cog in the machine doing cool things, but like nothing that's truly from your heart. And here I was in Senegal with no money and no team, but I had the autonomy to do anything I wanted. And so that's where I really tapped into the power of social media, of Google Hangouts, really of just all of these creative and amazing free tools to expand our mission. And I feel like in moving back overseas, but in a professional capacity, I really got to see what made me feel like alive and comfortable and happy. And I realized that I didn't like the office environment, and that I did a lot better with fewer resources and more control. So with that, the wheels for my current company, Heartfully, the wheels started really turning, and I moved back to the United States. Now we're, oh my gosh, you guys are getting the whole life story. So this is 2014, August. I move home, I get a job at Peace Corps doing marketing, which was pretty cool. And I Google, I have a great idea, what do I do next? And I talked to some friends, and they told me to go to a startup competition. So I went to this startup competition called Startup Weekend. If you haven't done it and you're interested in startups, this is the best way to break in to kind of this environment to see if it's right for you. And a lot of colleges actually run startup weekends too. Essentially, it's like a 2.5-day company building competition where on Friday night you announce your big idea, and then over the course of the weekend you actually create the beginnings of a company. And so this was the first time I'd ever spoken about Heartfully, which you still have no idea what it is yet. And I ended up winning the whole competition. And so that was really validating to me as a non-technical person in government that I could potentially flourish in this world that I don't know. And I was like, oh yeah, those are the Peace Corps skills, aren't they? You figure it out, you adapt, you learn new languages, and I just needed to use that in a technology context. And so for about 8 months, I was working at Peace Corps, and every single other hour of the day, I was building my company, which I'm going to tell you about really soon. And in summer of last year, summer of 2015, I was accepted into a tech incubator here in DC, and I quit my job, and I've been full-time now for like 9 months, I think. And it's really tough, and it's really great, and I've learned a lot. And so why don't I guess I'll just tell you briefly about my company and sort of how it was inspired by Peace Corps. And then I think I've just given you guys a huge barrage of information, and so I guess I can take a pause after that and just see if you've got questions for me. And if I'm talking too quickly, let me know, because sometimes I do that. So Heartfully is a wedding registry for charitable giving. And for those of you who haven't been to a lot of weddings yet, first, they're really fun. Nothing is better than an open bar with all your best friends and celebrating love. It's like kind of amazing. But yeah, so I have been going to all these weddings. I'm in my late 20s, and people are just getting married later, and they don't need more blenders and more crock pots, and so they were asking for either really weird things that are so ridiculous, like sushi plates, or just things that, like, you're never going to use, and you kind of just feel obligated to register for things so people know what to get you. Or they were asking for a honeymoon, which is a really cool new alternative where you can actually pay for your friends to go on their honeymoon. But I was going to all these weddings with all of these kind of like-minded, socially conscious friends, and I really saw this opportunity that and this missing kind of niche of being able to incorporate your philanthropic values that you already, that you do every day of your life, but incorporate them into one of the biggest days of your life in a way that your entire community can come together and help you do. And so the idea for Heartfully as a wedding registry specifically came from my experience in this village, this super poor village, where, like I said, we had no electricity, no running water. By every standard, we were poor. But when we celebrated a wedding or another big life event, let me tell you, it was a party, and it was a great time, and we scrounged together, and everyone had a full plate of food and a soda, and we turned on the generator, and we had lights till dawn, basically. And it was just this coming together of community to celebrate, and it was just beautiful. And that really influenced how I celebrate and the things that I value in a celebration. And so I've always sort of carried that with me. And so I saw weddings as sort of the natural opportunity to come together, celebrate, and do well for others. So, so basically, we partner with cool nonprofits all over the world. We have about 40 nonprofit partners now on 5 continents, and including domestically. And we feature the work they're doing. So maybe they're educating girls. Maybe they're doing training of homeless people for job skills. Maybe they're doing clean cook stove campaigns. Whatever it is, we feature that work, and you and your fiance can essentially select that project to support, and then your guests will buy you the items in that budget. So they'll buy you bricks and cement and windows or something if it's a classroom, things like that. And then after the wedding, we send an update to everyone who donated that shows just how you and your community were able to make such an impact in people's lives. And so we are doing that now just with weddings, but by next year we'll be into other milestones. So, not everyone's getting married, but everyone has a birthday, and unfortunately everyone dies, so funerals are an upcoming milestone as well. But really, it's more than just the individual holiday. It's just, I really believe that we are just at a time in this country, and a lot of us, there's just so much stuff. It's just excess. I don't want more. I don't need more. And yet I'm very sensitive to so many of the challenges around me. And if I can use an event where I have sort of purchasing influence over you to do well for others, then I'm going to seize that opportunity. So that's sort of the backstory of Heartfully. In terms of the day-to-day of entrepreneurship, it's really hard, and I'm super tired, and I don't think I've eaten yet today, but it's awesome, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. And I guess sort of like, if not now, when? So I really jumped into this, not necessarily head first, because I waited until I knew that this was really going somewhere before I quit my job. But yeah, I'm basically just running as fast and hard as I can for as long as I can. And with most tech companies, you don't make money in the beginning, so you have to raise investment, and you just have to be really resourceful. And that's sort of the phase I'm in now, is that kind of like young, hungry, figure it out phase. And I'm learning a lot every single day. So I guess with that, I would be happy to answer some of your questions about anything I just said.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Kate. That was amazing. Again, thanks for joining us, even though you haven't eaten today.
Sorry, that was too much information.
Not at all.
When you invited me, I'm not censored. I'll try not to swear.
We've shared the link to your website with our interns, and I just put it in the link sharing as well. At some point, if you want to like screen share and show us a little bit of it, that would be amazing.
Yeah, totally. Should I do that now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
it's so beautiful. They should definitely see it.
I'll show you guys just a sample registry and sort of how it works.
Cool.
So let me get it up. Okay, I haven't used Google Hangouts in a while. Let's see. Share entire screen. Google Hangouts. Okay, here we go. So can you guys see everything?
Yes.
All of my million tabs that are up? Okay. So this is the registry of Alexis and James. They're getting married on March 12th. And so this part is on every registry. Celebrate our love with a gift from the heart. And then here's where you customize. So you add that huge banner photo, and then you add a smaller photo here, and you share your story, like where you met, kind of just like any other wedding website. And then under our registry, you say why you're supporting this registry, why it means something for to you. And then here's the actual project. So this project is bringing high quality medical care to rural Guatemala. And you can learn more about it, the problem and solution, how it works, why it's important, and how it's a sustainable project. Here's a little more about the NGO, which I think is important to make sure that people understand this is legit. And then here's my favorite part. You get to buy gifts that are actually donations. So we've made them into really fun sort of presents. Let's see, refreshments for the surgical team during the medical marathon. Where's the games one? Entertainment and activities for children undergoing surgery. So say you wanted to buy that. You would purchase one, and then you'd say, okay, I'm feeling generous. I'll buy some medicine too. And then you go to checkout, and you see what's been purchased or what you want to purchase. You leave a message for the couple, and then you send your donation. And then the couple gets to see every donation made on their kind of admin page here. And so your gifted items, this shows who bought you what, how much they spent, and the note that they left you. And then after the wedding, we send all the money to the nonprofit, and then we send the impact update. So that's sort of how it works.
That's amazing. I love it so much. Okay, so we'll ask some of these questions that we've had. Okay. First of all, one of the questions we had from an intern was, what led you to focus on giving through a wedding registry versus, a different sort of fundraising platform? Like, what was your inspiration there?
You're frozen. Can you hear me?
Oh, no, you're frozen too. Okay. Can you hear me, Kate?
Who knew? Hello?
Hello?
I can hear you now,
Oh,
kind of.
perfect. Okay. Yes.
Okay.
I can hear you too. Are we? I think we're good. Okay. Cool.
What was the question?
So the question is, what led or inspired you to start a charitable giving platform that uses a wedding registry versus any sort of other fundraising method or platform? Like, what inspired the wedding registry side of your business?
Sure. So, I mean, the main part was really kind of just what I mentioned earlier was coming from this community and Peace Corps that really celebrated mostly weddings in such a special way. And then me becoming this professional wedding guest in my 20s, there was just a lot of like clear linkages that I saw. And weddings are when you give someone the most expensive gift. So I saw the highest opportunity for fundraising potential because the cool thing is like when you're running a 5K and you're looking for donations, people might give you $5 or $10 and that's not part of their regular budget, or maybe they'll give you 50, whatever. But when you go to a wedding, you're definitely giving someone a present. It's just part of our culture and it's expected. And so you only really need to convince the couple to do this, and then the guest, it's they're either going to spend $50 on a cheese grater or a donation, so it doesn't matter to them. So you're basically it's almost different than fundraising because you're just convincing the couple to take on this cause and not the 100 guests. And so that was sort of why I started with weddings. It's also a very saturated market. I'm sure you guys can name 10 crowdfunding platforms off the top of your head. And so weddings were sort of the most novel and newsworthy place to start. And so that's why we started with weddings.
Awesome. We also have a question from Jessica Pickering, who wants to know what it was like working at the State Department, which you definitely already touched on. If you have anything to add, that would be great. And then she also wanted to know more about the specific global HIV and AIDS initiative that you worked on. How does it relate to other projects within the Department of State, and sort of how does it function basically? Like, what was State doing around HIV and AIDS when you were working there?
Sure. So good questions. Working at State was awesome. It was something I would consider going back to down the line, but for being in my early 20s and just having the exposure to people that were so smart and making real policies. Like you are at the table. Like you might be taking notes for your boss at the table, but you're in the room and they're really discussing real time issues that are impacting people around the world. And for me, I would always tell people, I'm like, it's like being in The Economist. Like it's like a real time news magazine. You're just sitting there watching it unfold. So that was the really cool part about State. What I also mentioned is it's not a place, well, I think they're trying to make it more so, but it's not really a place for young people to like go crazy with their big ideas. Like there's a stay in your lane mentality that I experienced, and I think that that's fine. That's the structure and the hierarchy of that agency, and it's that way for a reason. Probably. And so like I learned so much. I had so much respect for my colleagues. Was it something that I felt like I could continue growing after 2 years? I didn't. It's different for everyone. And so I moved on to a new opportunity. But what America is doing for global HIV/AIDS is truly amazing. And the State Department, essentially Congress issues a big pot of money to U.S. agencies doing AIDS work to basically get the job done. And so State Department is like the manager of that purse and of the programs in general. So all of the kind of top level policies and funding allocations happen at State. So it's less of people at the State Department on the ground doing these programs. It's more of them helping guide the agenda. And so they would then give portions of the money, and this is big money. When I was there, it was like $7 billion a year. I don't know what it is anymore, to all of the U.S. agencies who are doing this work, and then those U.S. agencies would have requests. They're called requests for proposals, RFPs, RFAs, I don't know. And nonprofits would then bid to actually implement that work. So there's like so many chains. It's like a huge chain from like where the ideas happen to where the money goes to who's doing it to who's actually in the clinic. And it's really cool to sort of learn that. And at State, you're seeing it from a top level. And so I really appreciated learning about the entire system and how the whole chain works. Because you don't always get that when you're in one of the parts closer to the ground. So yeah, that was kind of a boring answer, but yeah, I think the United States at large is totally leading the global charge to ending HIV, and I was really proud to be part of it.
Definitely. I would just add one thing. If you are interested in working at State, interning at State, and Kate, you'll know more about this than I would. I know that like the security clearance process takes a very long time. So if that's something like you're really serious about and you are graduating soon or looking, at a summer semester internship opportunity, like definitely start applying as soon as possible because the security clearance can take like 6 months or longer. And so it's not a fun place to be stuck in when you have a job but you can't start it because
or you can't take the job because the clearance takes too long.
Right.
If you have the opportunity to intern at State, I highly recommend it. There are very few places where you get to see so many cool things just unfolding in front of you. It was pretty awesome.
Cool. All right, so let's move on to the next question. Emerald Garrett, she would like to know, if there were unexpected hurdles you encountered when starting Heartfully. I'm just going to assume that there were. So, would you mind talking about, maybe a challenge or two that you faced and how you overcame those?
Yeah. So probably the biggest one that like feeds into everything. Well, okay, money is always the biggest challenge in probably most people's lives. It remains one of the biggest challenges in mine, but that one's sort of obvious. You don't have money, you can't do things. So I won't go into depth on that one. But I would say something called imposter syndrome was something that plagued me. I'm sure some of you have heard about imposter syndrome. It's essentially this feeling that you don't belong where you are, and even if you were invited there, even if you've achieved things to get there, you still think you're fooling everyone and that like you're just waiting to be discovered, that you're a joke. And so that, you guys, plagued me for a long time, and it still affects me. I don't code. I had no background in business, so like, if you put all my skills in a pile on the table, like I could speak Swahili and I could, figure things out, but like I can't code and I can't make websites and I can't do my finances in a way that won't get me that won't send me to jail, basically. Like they have all these things, and so I was like, should I really be doing this? And that's crazy. Like I had this idea and I wanted to make it real. And so I basically just brick by brick figured it out. And I would ask people and I would Google things. I read everything. And it's not going to happen overnight. And you're totally going to look like an idiot at least 100 times. But if you can take your ego out of the kind of process and really focus on the long-term goals, then you forget that you might not, that maybe you don't deserve to be there, or that you looked really dumb just cold calling someone or doing something that made you uncomfortable. And so that's sort of a way that I've overcome imposter syndrome and feeling inadequate, is like, who cares what I am or what I'm up to or anything? Like, this is strictly about me creating this solution that I believe has to exist. So whatever I need to do to make that happen, I'm going to do. And then nothing else matters. You just get it done. And I think that when I keep saying like the figure it out mentality, I'm not saying that I always figure out the actual answer, but like if you give me something to do, my figuring it out might be asking someone, or might be realizing that, this would cost me $100 to outsource. That is such a better use of my time to pay someone than to sit down for 20 hours and do something mediocre. So I think the figure it out mentality is just about really knowing yourself and your capabilities, and then leveraging all of those to get your end result. It's not so much like learning everything.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing advice. And I do think that's such a key part, a key skill you build in the Peace Corps, because nothing any of us, ever did prepared us to be dropped off in our sites for 2 years and like learn a language we might not have ever heard of. You literally cannot prepare for that. And so just rolling with the punches and making the best of situations, I think, is like one of the key skills that you can have. And like Kate, it's gotten me into, fields and initiatives that I sometimes feel like I have no place being a part of. So yeah, that's great. That pretty much wraps up our questions. We had a lot of similar questions, so I didn't ask, every single one. But if anyone has any last minute things to add, oh, sorry, we just had one come in. Okay, so Mediha, she is wondering if you have any sort of final pieces of advice on how these interns can navigate their experiences now, most as undergraduate students, some as graduate students, and sort of leverage those into meaningful long-term opportunities, given that a lot of our interns are fairly uncertain of their futures. So does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think a lot of our interns, similar to you and also me, having these sort of liberal arts degrees that don't feel like specific technical skills, how can we sort of turn those into, long-term jobs in this uncertain world?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. The first thing I would say is just to embrace that uncertainty. Don't feel like if you don't get that single job, but that job at Google or Facebook, that this whole world isn't for you or whatever. Just kind of just like feel things out and see where it takes you. I've always just seen where things have taken me, and it's worked out pretty well so far. But a specific piece of advice would be to, if you kind of have an inkling of a field or a place of work or whatever that you might be interested in, intern. I mean, you guys are already doing that, but reach out, have coffee, meet the people who work there, see if you can get an internship. One of the most impressive, oh my gosh, when was this? I was at Peace Corps 2 years ago or something. I think I was in Senegal, maybe in DC. But I got an email from someone saying, I'm a student. I know you don't have the internships listed on your website, but I really, really love what this program is doing, and can I intern for you? And I was like, whoa, that's super surprising and cool. And I don't know if I would have been bold enough to do that when I was in college. And so I gave her an internship, and she was amazing. So if there's a place that you want to squeeze yourself into, just do it. Basically, the worst that they can do is say no. So make those cold calls. Again, it'll feel a little uncomfortable, but just be yourselves. People love students. They want to help students. It makes them feel young and cool. And the other thing that I've learned is when you want something, always ask for advice. Like there's this kind of thing they say in like the startup scene, like if you want advice, ask for money, and if you want money, ask for advice, because you're always going to get the opposite. So basically, if you want anything, ask someone what their expert opinion is, and people will love to tell you. And then in them telling you what they think, they'll suddenly feel this bond with you that kind of, they'll I don't know, it's really cool. You basically, if you ask someone for advice, they'll a lot of times feel connected to you in a way that they wouldn't if you were doing whatever else. So that is my advice, is ask for advice, because it makes people feel good about themselves. But yeah, I mean, you guys are all you've been selected for this great internship, so I think you're on the right path, whatever that path may be, and just be open to that path and join the Peace Corps.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sorry, Kate. We did have one more question come
Yeah.
in. Do you have time for just?
Yeah.
Okay, and then we'll cut it off. I promise.
Good.
Okay, awesome. So one of our interns, he's currently living in Uganda, and I think doing a study abroad program. And his primary project there is working with women who are living with HIV to provide education and counseling. And so he would love to know, he's fairly new there and still sort of figuring out the culture and how to work with women living with HIV. So he was wondering if you have any advice for volunteers in East Africa specifically, and then
Mhm.
like when you were in Peace Corps, what were some of the social and cultural obstacles that you faced when you were trying to present on HIV/AIDS?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow. Those are great questions. And congrats for being in Uganda doing such cool work. That's amazing. Uganda is a really great place. And I hope you go whitewater rafting on the Nile because that was really cool. I did that once. But anyway, I would say really in any, I mean, this is probably universal, but you can't just tell people what to do. You know, like you're on like on guest turf. You know, you have to kind of meet people where they are. And so my recommendation would to just be like would be to make friends. I guess identify who the key people, who are the influencers in that group of women or in that community that can sort of help you build trust and legitimacy. So meeting the influencers and kind of gaining their trust. And then for a moment, forgetting about the influencers and just befriending regular everyday people and learn from them. If you see a woman doing something cool or working or whatever, ask her if you can try or why she's doing that, or ask her about her children. Really, just creating a human bond is, I think, 10 times out of 10, the most effective way to do anything. And that's not something you need a college degree to do or any specific HIV training. Just kind of look in their eyes and say, "What's up?" And then once you sort of have that connection, then and there's no, I don't know, and like the walls are down, then I think it's a lot easier to share your knowledge and talk about things in a more direct way. But in terms of HIV education, yeah, I think like my experience in Tanzania is people know all the buzzwords. People were not confused about how AIDS was transmitted, and there really wasn't in my community a lot of stigma about talking about it because this was at a time, this was 2008 to 10, so medicine had been around for long enough that people knew that if you take your antiretroviral treatment that you can get that you can be healthier. And so in places where I remember like shortly before that when medicine was like a little more scarce, you just never talked about it because you just knew that you were going to get sick and die. And and it's just a different story now. So my experience was there wasn't a ton of stigma. I just came out and talked about things and use humor wherever possible. Like be the court jester because people love that. And you'll probably be that anyway without realizing it. So you might as well embrace it. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
awesome. Well, thank you so much. So many gems of useful advice here, and this was like very fascinating, even for me. And I thought I knew your story, so this was awesome to hear.
Yeah.
So just to remind everyone who's watching, and of course this will be recorded and posted to YouTube, don't forget to join us next Thursday from 2 to 3 Eastern Time. We're going to have Mike Schwartzman, who works at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in the International Division, and he's going to be talking about the role of international trade and foreign direct investment within foreign policy of the United States. So that will be also really interesting.
Can I
all
add
right.
one more thing?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to say thank you for hosting and inviting me, and thanks to anyone listening or who will be listening. And if you guys have any questions for me later, you can feel free to send me an email. My email is Kate, Kate, @heartful.ly. And if anyone's looking for internships, hit me up.
Awesome.
I'm always looking for interns, both to coordinate with nonprofits and to do marketing and social media and some blogging. So if any of those things sound interesting, send me your resume and let's talk.
Awesome. That sounds like an amazing opportunity for everyone. Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Kate. And we'll see you guys all next week.
Bye.
Bye.